My daughter-in-law slapped me in the face and my son laughed. So I changed my will and donated my $10 million fortune to charity. The opulent dining room, usually a tableau of forced smiles and carefully curated indifference, shattered into a tableau of shock. The air, thick with the scent of roasted lamb and the clinking of crystal, suddenly held a different kind of tension. A sharp, cracking sound echoed through the high-ceilinged space, bouncing off the antique tapestries and the polished mahogany, followed by a stunned, almost unbearable silence. Eleonora, a woman whose 78 years had etched dignity into every line of her face, felt a searing pain bloom across her left cheek. Her hand instinctively rose, not to defend herself, but to simply touch the spot where her daughter-in-law, Serafina, had just delivered a brutal, open-handed slap. The sting was immense, a sharp, burning reminder, but it paled in comparison to the cold, hollow ache that spread through Eleonora's chest, rooting itself deep within her heart. For decades, she had endured insults, neglect, and the crushing weight of being treated as nothing more than an open vault, a bottomless wellspring of funds. But this was different. This was a physical assault, a final, unadulterated act of contempt that stripped away the last veneer of civility. Her gaze, steady and unwavering despite the throbbing pain, shifted from the furious, contorted visage of Serafina to her only son, Cassian. Cassian, a man of 52 years, whose handsome features were usually softened by an air of cultivated charm and a perpetually relaxed demeanor, stood frozen. A flicker of something akin to fear, or perhaps profound discomfort, was visible in his eyes. He had witnessed the entire, horrifying scene. The words that had preceded the slap, Serafina's venomous dismissal of Eleonora's old-fashioned ways as a hindrance to their modern life, delivered with a sneer that twisted her beautiful face, followed by Eleonora's quiet, heartbroken attempt to voice her hurt, her simple plea for understanding, hung in the air like a noxious gas, poisoning the lavish setting. Now, as Eleonora's eyes locked onto his, searching for some sign of concern, some vestige of the son she once knew, a nervous, almost dismissive chuckle escaped Cassian's lips. It was a small, pathetic sound, barely audible over the ringing silence, a weak attempt to defuse the unbearable tension, to perhaps signal his wife that he was on her side, or simply to cope with his own spinelessness in the face of conflict. But to Eleonora, it was a hammer blow, shattering the last, fragile shards of hope she had clung to for so long. It was the sound of her son endorsing her humiliation, laughing at her pain. It was the absolute end. A profound stillness settled over Eleonora. The anger, the hurt, the decades of stifled tears, the quiet despair, they didn't erupt in a storm of emotion. Instead, they crystallized into something cold, clear, and utterly resolute. It was as if a lifetime of yearning for love and acceptance had simply evaporated, leaving behind a void, yet also a stark, uncompromising clarity. She lowered her hand from her cheek, her movements slow, deliberate, each gesture imbued with a new, quiet authority. Her gaze, which had for so long been filled with a lifetime of yearning for love, for a simple acknowledgement of her worth beyond her wealth, hardened into an impenetrable glaze. She looked at Serafina, whose chest still heaved with a mixture of rage and a perverse, ugly satisfaction. She looked at Cassian, whose nervous smile wavered and then vanished entirely under her unyielding stare. There was no argument left in her, no plea, no accusation. There was only an absolute, unshakable finality, a decision made in the crucible of ultimate betrayal. I believe Eleonora's voice was a whisper, yet it cut through the silence with the precision of a scalpel, each word perfectly articulated, carrying an unexpected weight. My presence here is no longer required. She turned, her back ramrod straight, her posture radiating an unfamiliar, formidable dignity. She walked out of the lavish dining room, her footsteps echoing faintly on the polished marble floors, each step a declaration of independence. She did not look back, not even for a fleeting second. Her chauffeur, a man named George who had served her late husband for decades and now served her with quiet, unwavering loyalty, was already waiting by the Rolls-Royce. He opened the door without a word, his experienced eyes sensing the profound, irreversible shift in the air around her. As the car pulled away from the sprawling mansion, the symbol of so much unrequited generosity, so much misplaced hope, Eleonora stared out at the night. The pain in her cheek was a dull throb, a minor distraction, but the pain in her heart, a constant companion for so long, had finally, mercifully, gone numb. She had reached the absolute end of her tether. The dawn would bring not despair, but a quiet, powerful revolution. The roots of this bitter harvest stretched back decades, entwined with the immense fortune Eleonora had inherited upon the untimely death of her beloved husband, the industrialist Alexander Thorne. Alexander, a man of formidable intellect, sharp business acumen, and an even greater heart, had built an empire from scratch, a testament to his vision and relentless effort. He had cherished Eleonora, not just as his wife, but as his confidant, his intellectual equal, his muse. Their life together had been one of shared dreams, quiet luxury, and the profound joy of raising their only son, Cassian. Alexander had always instilled in Cassian the values of hard work, integrity, financial prudence, and self-reliance, hoping to pass on not just wealth, but character. He often took young Cassian to the factories, explaining the intricate processes, the importance of every employee, the dignity of labor. Eleonora, watching them, had believed they were building a solid foundation for their son's future. But fate, in its cruel wisdom, had taken Alexander too soon, a sudden, unexpected heart attack at 65, leaving Eleonora a widow at 60, with a vast fortune and a son who, despite his outwardly charming demeanor, had begun to show significant cracks in his character, cracks that Alexander, with his strong hand, had perhaps kept hidden. Cassian, still in his late 20s when his father passed, had never truly embraced the rigorous discipline required to manage the family businesses. He preferred the softer life, the exclusive social scene, the easy gratification that unearned wealth could provide. Alexander's lessons seemed to have barely registered. Eleonora, still reeling from the profound grief of losing her soulmate, had tried her best to guide him, to support him in taking over the reins, but Cassian's interest waned quickly. He dabbled in a few ventures, none successful, always falling back on the comfortable cushion of his mother's wealth. He would often complain about the tedious meetings, the dull financial reports, the stress of responsibility. Eleonora, desperate to see him flourish, had tried to find him mentors, arranged business trips, even offered to manage the administrative side herself if he would just focus on the strategic. But his ambition was a fleeting thing, easily overshadowed by the allure of leisure. When Cassian met Serafina, a woman of dazzling beauty and even more dazzling ambition, Eleonora had initially been hopeful. Serafina, with her sharp wit and undeniable charisma, seemed like she might be the catalyst Cassian needed. Perhaps Serafina would inspire him, ground him, motivate him to take his place in the world. Instead, Serafina saw Eleonora's inheritance not as a legacy of hard work and responsibility, a sacred trust to be managed, but as an endless wellspring of personal gratification, a resource to be exploited without limit. Her eyes, often fixed on Eleonora's jewelry or the lavish items in magazines, sparkled with an acquisitive gleam that Eleonora found unsettling, yet chose to overlook, convinced that marriage and family would soften her. From the moment they married, Eleonora became, in essence, their personal bank, their silent, ever-present financier. When they expressed a desire for a grander residence, lamenting their current, perfectly adequate home as too small for their expanding social ambitions, Eleonora had not hesitated. She had provided the entire $2 million down payment for their sprawling, multi-million-dollar mansion in the exclusive hills, a place far beyond Cassian's meager and sporadic income. "It's for the grandchildren, Mother," Serafina would coo, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness, her eyes glittering with thinly veiled avarice, "a proper place for them to grow up, a family legacy." Eleonora, whose greatest wish was to see her son and his family happy, to provide them with every advantage, had simply nodded and, with a sigh she kept hidden, transferred the funds. She continued to pay the exorbitant property taxes, which often ran into tens of thousands annually, ensuring they never felt the slightest pinch. She even covered the costs of extensive renovations Serafina demanded, turning the already luxurious home into a gilded cage of endless expense, a state-of-the-art home cinema, a custom-built library that remained largely unread, an elaborate outdoor kitchen, and an infinity pool that mirrored the distant city lights. Their fleet of luxury cars, the latest Mercedes S-Class for Cashin, a sleek Range Rover autobiography for Serafina, and later, even a high-performance sports car for their eldest grandson upon his graduation from university, were all leased, or often purchased outright, by Eleonora. "The leases are such a bother, mother," Cashin would sigh dramatically, feigning exhaustion, "and the maintenance. You know how unreliable these new models can be, always in the shop." Eleonora, remembering Alexander's insistence on practical, reliable vehicles, would simply sign the checks, the numbers blurring into an endless stream. She paid for their lavish holidays, annual trips to the Maldives, ski vacations in the Swiss Alps, cultural tours through Europe that involved private guides and exclusive access. Each trip cost hundreds of thousands, encompassing first-class flights, private villas in exotic locations, Michelin-starred dining experiences every night, and often, private jet charters for convenience. Oh, mother, the children simply adored the private yacht in Capri. The sunsets were simply divine. Thank you, you're simply the best." Serafina would gush upon their return, her voice filled with feigned gratitude, never once offering to contribute a dime, never acknowledging the sheer scale of the generosity. The grandchildren's elite education, from exclusive private schools with eye-watering tuition fees to prestigious universities abroad, was entirely Eleonora's burden. Tuition fees that would cripple most families were paid promptly by her, year after year. She funded their extracurricular activities, expensive equestrian lessons at exclusive clubs, private music tutors for instruments they quickly abandoned, elite sports camps in distant countries, summer programs in foreign languages. She bought their designer clothes, their latest gadgets, phones, tablets, gaming consoles that were replaced almost annually, and their extravagant birthday and Christmas gifts, often receiving only a perfunctory nod of acknowledgement. Her own modest, yet elegant home, filled with antique furniture and cherished memories, seemed almost Spartan compared to the unbridled excess of her son's household, a stark contrast between a life of quiet appreciation and one of relentless consumption. Yet, despite her immense generosity, the respect she craved remained elusive, a mirage always just out of reach. Eleonora was rarely invited to their intimate family gatherings unless a significant financial decision was on the table, a new investment Serafina had researched or a new property venture Cashin was vaguely contemplating. When she did visit, she was often relegated to a quiet corner, her opinions dismissed with a wave of the hand, her presence tolerated rather than cherished. Serafina, in particular, made little effort to conceal her contempt, her disdain for Eleonora's perceived old-fashioned sensibilities. "Oh, mother, do you really need to wear that old brooch? It's so dated," she might comment, eyeing Eleonora's heirloom jewelry, pieces of immense sentimental value, with thinly veiled disdain, as if they were costume trinkets. Or, during the rare family dinners Eleonora hosted at her own home, hoping to create a sense of warmth and tradition, Serafina would openly critique the food, the decor, even the way Eleonora arranged the flowers, always with a condescending tone. "Darling," Serafina would say to Cashin, loud enough for Eleonora to hear, "you know mother means well, but her taste is just so traditional. And this house is so small." Cashin would simply chuckle weakly, a sound that grated on Eleonora's nerves, or change the subject abruptly, never once defending his mother, never once standing up for her, leaving her to absorb the barbs alone. Eleonora remembered a particular Christmas, just 3 years prior, a memory that now felt like a premonition. She had spent weeks planning a special family dinner, cooking many of Alexander's favorite dishes, hoping to rekindle some warmth, some genuine connection. She had decorated her home meticulously, ensuring every detail was perfect for what she hoped would be a joyous family reunion. Cashin and Serafina arrived an hour late, their faces already flushed from a pre-dinner party they had attended, their laughter echoing a little too loudly. They barely greeted Eleonora, immediately complaining about the heavy food and the stuffy atmosphere, refusing the carefully prepared dishes in favor of a light salad they had brought themselves. Later, While Eleonora was clearing the table, a familiar ache in her back, she overheard Serafina, her voice loud and clear, say to Cashin, honestly, darling, your mother means well, but these dinners are such a bore. And the house is so old. Can't we just send her on a cruise for a few months and redecorate? Imagine the space we could have. Cashin had laughed, a short, sharp sound that pierced Eleonora's heart like a shard of ice. He didn't even bother to lower his voice. It was then, a quiet thought had formed in Eleonora's mind. She was not a cherished mother or grandmother, but an inconvenient obstacle, and a resource to be managed. Each slight, each dismissal, each time her presence was treated as a nuisance rather than a blessing, chipped away at Eleonora's spirit, eroding her sense of self-worth. She would rationalize it, tell herself they were busy, that they loved her in their own way, that perhaps her money was truly the only way she could express her love and secure her place in their lives. She would cling to fleeting moments of politeness, magnifying them into proof of affection. But deep down, a profound sadness festered, a quiet despair that grew with each passing year. She had given them everything, not just financially, but emotionally. She had poured her love, her hope, her very being into their lives, nurturing their ambitions, shielding them from hardship, only to be drained dry and discarded, like a spent battery. The slap, and Cashin's laugh, were not just a single act of physical and emotional violence, they were the culmination of decades of slow, agonizing emotional torture, the definitive end of an era of unrequited devotion. The well had finally run dry, not of money, for that was still abundant, but of Eleonora's capacity to endure, to hope, to sacrifice her own dignity. The morning after the dinner, Eleonora awoke with a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years, perhaps even decades. The pain on her cheek was a physical reminder of the previous night's brutality, a stark, undeniable reality. But the numbness in her heart was a revelation, a profound quietude that replaced the familiar ache of disappointment. There was no more hope to be shattered, no more illusion to cling to, no more, maybe next time. She had given them everything, and they had given her a slap and a laugh. It was enough. More than enough. A quiet, firm resolution settled within her, like bedrock. She called her longtime attorney, Mr. Davies, a man of quiet discretion and unwavering professionalism who had managed the Thorne family's legal affairs for decades, a man who had known Alexander well. His voice was a comforting rumble as he answered, always composed. Mr. Davies, it's Eleonora Thorne. I need you to come to my residence, today, as soon as possible. I want to revise my will. Completely. Mr. Davies, accustomed to Eleonora's calm and elegant demeanor, detected an unusual note of steel in her voice, a quiet authority he had rarely heard. He knew then that something significant had transpired. Of course, Mrs. Thorne. I'll be there within the hour. Within 90 minutes, Mr. Davies was seated in Eleonora's elegant drawing room, a legal pad open on his knee, his pen poised. The room, filled with the scent of old books and fresh flowers, seemed to hum with the unspoken gravity of the moment. Eleonora, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, her posture perfectly erect, began to speak, her voice clear, steady, and entirely devoid of emotion, as if discussing a business transaction rather than the fate of her family fortune. Mr. Davies, as you know, my current will designates Cashin as the sole beneficiary of my estate, including the trust funds, properties, and all liquid assets, totaling approximately $10 million, a figure that, I believe, has been thoroughly and meticulously managed. Mr. Davies nodded, his pen poised, ready to record her wishes. That is correct, Mrs. Thorne. It has been a substantial and well-managed estate. And your wishes now? Eleonora met his gaze, her eyes unwavering, holding a newfound, unyielding resolve. I wish to disinherit Cashin Thorne and Serafina Thorne entirely. They are to receive nothing. Not a single penny. No assets, no trusts, no portion of the estate whatsoever. Mr. Davies's eyebrows rose slightly, a rare display of surprise from the stoic lawyer, but he simply wrote it down, his pen scratching quietly on the page. He had seen family disputes before, but rarely with such a definitive and absolute stance from a client of Eleanor's stature. "And to whom shall the estate be bequeathed, Mrs. Thorne?" Eleanora took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea, the warmth of the cup a small comfort in the coolness of her resolve. "My entire fortune, the full $10 million, is to be donated to the Global Children's Hope Foundation. You know the charity, Mr. Davies, they do excellent work providing education and healthcare to underprivileged children worldwide. I have been a quiet supporter for many years." Mr. Davies nodded, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "A most commendable choice, Mrs. Thorne. I will prepare the new will immediately. It will, of course, supersede all previous testamentary dispositions and be legally ironclad." As Mr. Davies meticulously drafted the new will, Eleanora made a series of other calls, each one a hammer blow to the life of luxury her son and daughter-in-law had taken for granted. First, to her private bank. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson. It's Eleanora Thorne. I need to cancel all standing orders and direct debits associated with Cashin Thorne and Serafina Thorne's accounts, effective immediately. That includes the mortgage payments on their mansion, the leases on their vehicles, the monthly allowance to Cashin's personal account, and any credit cards linked to my funds." Mr. Henderson, usually effusively polite and deferential, sounded momentarily flustered, perhaps even a little shocked. "Mrs. Thorne, that's quite a substantial number of payments. Are you absolutely certain? This is a significant change." "Absolutely certain, Mr. Henderson," Eleanora replied, her voice firm, unwavering. "Effective immediately. Please ensure there are no exceptions." Next, she called the leasing companies for the various luxury cars, informing them in a calm, business-like tone that she would no longer be responsible for the payments, that the accounts were to be closed. She then contacted the private schools and universities, confirming that she would no longer be paying the tuition fees for her grandchildren, effective the end of the current term, or immediately for any new enrollments. She even called the credit card companies, canceling the supplementary cards Serafina and Cashin had used so freely for years, often for hundreds of thousands of dollars in extravagant purchases, from designer clothing to elaborate restaurant bills. Each call was a precise, deliberate strike, dismantling the gilded cage she had inadvertently built around them. The first ripple of panic struck Cashin and Serafina around lunchtime. Serafina, lounging by their infinity pool, attempting to purchase a new diamond tennis bracelet online, perhaps to soothe her lingering irritation from the previous night. Her credit card, usually seamlessly approved, was declined. She tried another, then another, each one linked to Eleanor's accounts, each one a gateway to effortless luxury. All declined. "What on earth?" she shrieked, storming into Cashin's study where he was, as usual, idly browsing luxury real estate listings he couldn't afford, a fantasy life always within reach thanks to his mother's money. "My cards are being declined. All of them. This is outrageous. It must be some bank error." Cashin, initially dismissive, tried his own card, then his primary credit card, both linked to Eleanor's generous weekly allowance. Declined. A cold knot of dread began to form in his stomach, a feeling he was entirely unaccustomed to. "It must be a temporary system error," he muttered, trying to sound reassuring to himself as much as to Serafina, but his voice lacked conviction, a tremor of unease starting to rattle his cultivated composure. The real panic set in that afternoon, as the world of convenience they inhabited began to unravel. The landscaping company called, demanding immediate payment for their last month's service, stating the usual direct debit had been rejected. Then the house cleaner called, then the private chef, all with similar complaints. By early evening, a terse, automated email from the mortgage lender arrived, informing them that their monthly payment, usually automatically deducted without a thought, had bounced. Their mortgage was now delinquent, a term that sent a chill down Cashin's spine. Their lavish world, built entirely on Eleanor's generosity, on the unspoken assumption of her endless financial support, was beginning to crumble around them with alarming speed. Cashin called Eleanor's landline. No answer. He tried her mobile. Straight to voicemail. Serafina, meanwhile, was frantically calling her friends, trying to borrow money, but no one was willing to lend the substantial sums they needed to cover their immediate expenses, let alone their lifestyle. The well, they were discovering, was indeed dry. The next morning, the desperation reached a fever pitch. Cashin's car lease company called, demanding immediate payment or they would repossess the vehicle within 48 hours. Serafina's Range Rover lease company followed suit, their tone polite but firm. The university registrar called, stating that the grandchildren's tuition payments had not been received and they would be unable to re-enroll for the next semester. The fabric of their existence was tearing apart at the seams. "She's doing this on purpose," Serafina screamed, her voice hoarse with pure, unadulterated rage, throwing a priceless antique vase across the living room, shattering it against the wall. "That old witch. She's punishing us. This is all because of that stupid dinner. She's vindictive." Cashin, white-faced, paced frantically, running his hands through his perfectly coiffed hair. "But why? She's never done anything like this before. She loves us. She loves the children." His voice was laced with a pathetic mixture of disbelief and self-pity, a complete inability to grasp the profound reason for Eleonora's actions. He refused to acknowledge his role in the previous night's events. He refused to acknowledge the decades of disrespect, the years of taking, the utter lack of gratitude. "We need to go see her," Serafina declared, her eyes narrowing with a cunning desperation, her rage momentarily giving way to a calculated strategy. "She's trying to scare us. She can't possibly mean it. She knows we rely on her. She'll come to her senses when she sees us, when she sees how distraught we are. We just need to apologize, charm her a little. It always works." They dressed carefully, trying to project an air of concerned innocence, a facade of wounded family. They arrived at Eleonora's elegant, understated home later that afternoon, unannounced, their faces carefully schooled into expressions of distress. Cashin rang the doorbell, his knuckles white, a performative urgency in his gesture. The door opened, revealing Eleonora's loyal housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, a woman who had seen much over the years, and who regarded them with a cool, knowing gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mrs. Thorne is occupied," she stated, blocking the entrance with her formidable presence, her eyes conveying a silent message of disapproval. "Occupied? She's our mother, Mrs. Jenkins. Let us in," Cashin demanded, pushing past the housekeeper with a shove that made the older woman stumble slightly. Serafina, her face contorted with a mixture of anger and feigned concern, followed close behind, stepping over the threshold as if claiming dominion. They found Eleonora in the conservatory, a quiet haven filled with exotic orchids blooming in vibrant profusion and the gentle murmur of a small water feature, a place of peace and contemplation. She was reading, a classical music piece playing softly in the background, a melody of quiet contentment. She looked up as they burst in, her expression calm, betraying no surprise, no anger, only an unsettling serenity. "Mother! What is the meaning of this?" Cashin blurted out, his voice a strained mix of anger and bewildered entitlement. "Our cards are all being declined. The mortgage payment bounced. The car companies are threatening to repossess. What are you doing? This is madness." Serafina, ever the manipulator, regained her composure, adopting a softer, more manipulative tone, her voice laced with false concern. "Eleonora, darling, we are so worried about you. Are you feeling well? Is someone taking advantage of you? We understand you might be upset about last night, but surely you wouldn't do this to your own family, your own grandchildren? Think of the children, Eleonora." Her voice was dripping with saccharine coating over her underlying fury, a desperate attempt to reassert control. Eleonora closed her book, placing it carefully on the small table beside her, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She looked at them, first Serafina, then Cashin, her gaze piercing, unwavering, seeing through their performance. Upset, she finally spoke, her voice still quiet, almost a whisper, but carrying an unyielding strength, a steel that had been forged in the fire of their disrespect. Upset is an understatement, Serafina. Disappointed, heartbroken, betrayed, perhaps these words come closer to capturing the essence of what I felt, and have felt for many years. It is a feeling you have carefully cultivated within me. Betrayed? Serafina shrieked, her carefully constructed facade crumbling completely, her fury escaping like steam from a kettle. We're your family. We're your son and daughter-in-law. We are entitled to your support. You promised Cashin everything. This is cruel. This is vindictive. You're just an old woman throwing a tantrum. Entitled? Eleonora's voice remained even, a stark, powerful contrast to Serafina's histrionics. Her gaze fixed on Serafina, unblinking. You speak of entitlement. Let me tell you about entitlement, Serafina. It is expecting a multi-million-dollar down payment on your mansion, and then complaining about the property taxes. It is demanding new luxury cars every 2 years, and then dismissing the person who pays for them as old-fashioned. It is expecting lavish holidays across the globe, costing hundreds of thousands, and then belittling your benefactor's taste in decor at her own home. It is accepting every financial gift, every convenience, every luxury, while offering nothing but scorn in return. That, Serafina, is entitlement. She turned her gaze to Cashin, who stood speechless, his handsome face paling with each word, the reality of his mother's transformation slowly dawning on him. And you, Cashin. My son. My only son. I poured my life, my love, my entire fortune into you. I wanted to see you happy, to give you a life of comfort and joy, to help you build upon your father's legacy. I paid for everything. Your education, your first apartment, your failed business ventures, your entire adult life of leisure. I gave you everything your father worked for, everything I inherited, every advantage I could possibly provide. And what did I ask for in return? Love. Respect. Inclusion. To be treated as a cherished matriarch, not an ATM. To be seen, truly seen, as your mother, not just your source of funds. A flicker of raw pain crossed Eleonora's face, a momentary crack in her carefully constructed composure, quickly controlled. Last night, Serafina physically assaulted me. And you, Cashin, you laughed. You laughed. In that moment, I realized that I had spent decades pouring water into a bottomless pit. I had given you everything, and you had given me nothing but contempt, indifference, and ultimately, violence. That laugh, Cashin, was the sound of my last shred of hope dying. It was the moment I understood that everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed, meant nothing to you. Absolutely nothing. Cashin tried to interject, stammering, his voice barely a whisper, "Mother, no, I didn't mean, it was just a nervous laugh." I was stressed, it meant everything, Cashin. Eleonora cut him off, her voice rising slightly, imbued with an authority they had rarely heard from her, an unshakable conviction. It meant you chose your wife's fleeting rage over your mother's dignity. It meant you condoned her violence. It meant I was truly alone, despite all I had sacrificed, all I had provided. It meant the mother you claimed to love was merely a disposable convenience. Serafina, seeing her manipulation fail, seeing the absolute futility of her pleas, shifted tactics again, her voice laced with a desperate, venomous threat. You're making a huge mistake, Eleonora. This will ruin us. What about the children? Your own grandchildren. Do you want them to suffer? To lose everything? Is that the kind of grandmother you want to be? They'll hate you. You'll be alone. Eleonora looked at Serafina, a profound sadness, a deep disappointment, in her eyes, but no wavering. My grandchildren. You have taught them to be as entitled as you are. They barely acknowledge my existence unless a new gadget or an expensive trip is involved. They were taught to see me not as a person, but as a resource. And as for ruining you, You have chosen to live a life built entirely on someone else's generosity, without any thought of earning your own way, without any concept of responsibility. That is not my mistake, Serafina, it is yours. As for my grandchildren hating me, perhaps they will. But they will also learn a very harsh, but necessary, lesson about self-reliance, responsibility, and the true cost of unchecked greed. A lesson I should have allowed them to learn years ago. She took a deep, steadying breath, the faint scent of orchids filling the air. My decision is final. As of yesterday, my will has been revised. My entire fortune, $10 million, will go to the Global Children's Hope Foundation. You will receive nothing. All financial support has been terminated. The mortgage, the cars, the credit cards, the tuition fees, all of it is now your responsibility. You will need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, something you have studiously avoided for decades, something your father always hoped you would do, Cashin. The silence that followed was deafening, heavier than any spoken word. Cashin stared at her, his mouth agape, a slow, horrifying understanding dawning in his eyes, replaced quickly by a desperate, all-consuming fear. Serafina's face contorted, her carefully constructed mask of concern crumbling to reveal a raw, terrifying fury, a primal scream of rage trapped in her throat. You can't do this, she hissed, taking a step forward as if to strike her again, her hand twitching. I already have, Eleonora said, her voice now completely devoid of emotion, a fortress around her. She rose from her chair, her posture regal, unyielding, an embodiment of quiet power. Now, I believe this conversation is concluded. Please leave my home. Cashin and Serafina stood frozen for a moment, unable to comprehend the finality in her voice, the unshakable resolve in her eyes. It was not the meek, forgiving mother they knew, the one who would always capitulate, always give. This was a different Eleonora, a woman who had finally found her power and was wielding it with quiet, devastating precision. They tried to argue, to plead, to threaten, their voices rising in desperation, but Eleonora simply walked to the door and opened it, her gaze fixed on the peaceful garden outside, her back to them. The implicit dismissal, the utter lack of engagement, was more powerful than any shouted command. Defeated, and realizing the utter futility of their efforts against this new, formidable Eleonora, Cashin and Serafina stumbled out of the house, leaving a trail of stunned silence and shattered illusions in their wake. The drive back to their mansion was a nightmare of accusations and recriminations, a cacophony of blame. This is all your fault, Cashin. If you had just defended her, she wouldn't have done this. Serafina screamed, her voice hoarse, her designer handbag tossed carelessly onto the passenger seat. My fault? You're the one who slapped her. You're the one who always treated her like dirt. You wanted the mansion, the cars, the holidays. Cashin retorted, his own fear turning to raw resentment, the fragile bond between them snapping under the strain. Their luxurious bubble had not just burst, it had been incinerated, leaving only ashes. The cold reality of their new financial predicament began to bite immediately, relentlessly. The very next day, the leasing company repossessed Cashin's gleaming Mercedes, taking it right from their perfectly manicured driveway, a humiliating spectacle for the neighbors. Serafina's Range Rover followed 2 days later. Their children, accustomed to chauffeured rides and designer clothes, suddenly found themselves stranded, their expensive cars gone, their credit cards declined at their favorite boutiques, their privileged bubble deflating with a sickening hiss. The headmaster of the elite private school called, politely but firmly informing them that due to outstanding tuition fees, their youngest daughter would not be permitted to attend classes. The grandchildren, suddenly stripped of their privileged lives, reacted with a mix of confusion, anger, and a startling lack of empathy, blaming their parents and, of course, their grandmother for their sudden downfall, unable to grasp the concept of earning one's own way. The mansion, once a symbol of their effortless wealth, became a ticking time bomb, the elegant facade mocking their dwindling resources. With no mortgage payments, the bank initiated foreclosure proceedings swiftly. They tried to sell some of Serafina's extensive jewelry collection, but the market value was a fraction of what they had paid, and it barely made a dent in their mounting debts. They were forced to lay off their entire staff, the loyal housekeeper, the talented chef, the meticulous gardeners, the pool cleaner, plunging them into the unfamiliar, unpleasant world of domestic chores and grocery shopping, a stark, humiliating contrast to their former lives. Their once vast and eager social circle, who had so eagerly basked in their reflected luxury, slowly but surely began to distance themselves. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls went unanswered. The whispers, sharp and critical, followed them everywhere, a constant reminder of their fall from grace. Serafina tried desperately to maintain appearances, to keep up the pretense of wealth, but her designer clothes and expensive handbags now felt like a cruel mockery against the backdrop of their rapidly dwindling resources and the growing dust motes in their empty mansion. Cashin, forced to find a job for the first time in decades, discovered that his charm and connections, without his mother's money, amounted to very little. He was forced to take a low-paying administrative role, a humiliating blow to his inflated ego, a stark reminder of his utter lack of practical skills. Meanwhile, Eleonora began to truly live a life vibrant and authentic. The morning after the confrontation, she felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in decades, a profound sense of liberation. The invisible shackles that had bound her to their insatiable demands, to their endless cycle of taking and her giving, had vanished. She called an old friend, Beatrice, a vivacious woman with a hearty laugh and a sharp mind, whom she had lost touch with over the years due to her family's isolating demands, their insistence that she only socialize with those who could benefit them. "Beatrice, it's Eleonora. I've missed you terribly. Would you care to join me for lunch? And perhaps a trip to Tuscany in the spring, to explore the vineyards we always talked about?" Beatrice, delighted and surprised by the call, readily agreed, her joyful voice a balm to Eleonora's soul. Eleonora rediscovered her passions, dormant for too long. She started painting again, a hobby she had abandoned after Alexander's death, as Cashin and Serafina had often mocked her amateurish attempts, dismissing her artistic endeavors as a waste of time. She joined a book club, started attending classical concerts at the symphony, and volunteered at a local library, finding immense joy in simple interactions, shared interests, and the quiet satisfaction of contributing to her community. Her home, once a lonely sanctuary, became a vibrant space, filled with the warmth of genuine friendships and shared laughter. She traveled, not to lavish resorts chosen by Serafina, but to quiet, beautiful places that spoke to her soul, the ancient ruins of Greece, where history whispered from every stone, the serene gardens of Japan, where peace resided in every perfectly placed rock, the bustling markets of Morocco, vibrant with life and color. She spent her money on experiences, on learning, on connecting with the world and its diverse tapestry of humanity, not on impressing a family that refused to be impressed, that only saw her as a means to an end. She found a deeper meaning in her wealth. Months turned into a year, then two. Eleonora, now 79, looked younger, her eyes sparkling with a newfound vitality, her posture more relaxed, yet still dignified. She had truly embraced her freedom, spending her mornings tending to her beloved orchids, her afternoons exploring new avenues of interest, and her evenings with friends who cherished her for who she was, for her wisdom and kindness, not for what she possessed. She had even visited the Global Children's Hope Foundation, seeing firsthand the profound impact her donation was having. The grateful smiles of the children, the dedication of the staff, the tangible difference her wealth was making, it filled a void in her heart that her own family had left empty, a void she hadn't realized could be so completely filled. She had found a true purpose, a way to use her immense wealth for genuine good, rather than as a tool for endless, unrequited appeasement. Cashin and Serafina, on the other hand, were a shadow of their former selves. The mansion had been foreclosed, forcing them into a much smaller, rented house in a less desirable neighborhood, a stark decline from their once opulent lifestyle. Cashin struggled to hold down a job, his arrogance clashing with the realities of the working world, his sense of entitlement preventing him from accepting any role that didn't immediately align with his inflated self-worth. Serafina, stripped of her social standing and access to unlimited funds, became increasingly bitter and isolated, her beauty fading under the strain of financial anxiety and resentment. Their children, forced to attend public schools and adjust to a drastically different lifestyle, resented their parents' inability to maintain their former opulence, their own entitlement now manifesting as anger and blame, directed at everyone but themselves. The family unit, once held together by the glue of Eleanor's money, had fractured into resentment, blame, and bitter recriminations. They were learning, the hard way, that money could buy luxury, but it could never buy genuine love, respect, or true happiness. Eleanor's triumph was not about revenge, but about liberation. It was a powerful testament to the truth that sometimes, the greatest act of love is to stop enabling, to reclaim one's dignity, and to recognize that true wealth lies not in what you possess, but in the peace you find within yourself. It was a profound lesson that genuine affection cannot be bought, and that one's greatest loyalty should always be to their own well-being and self-respect. This story of Eleanor's ultimate stand for dignity and self-worth is just one of many tales of resilience and unexpected justice we share on this channel. If you found yourself rooting for Eleanora, and believe that true character is revealed when the money runs out, then you're in the right place. We bring you powerful stories of transformation, lessons learned, and triumphs over adversity. Don't miss out on our next compelling narrative. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new story drops. We love hearing from you. Have you ever encountered a situation where ungratefulness was met with an unexpected act of justice? Or perhaps, have you had to make a tough decision to reclaim your own peace and dignity? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.